So as Asa just mentioned, our speaker, and as you, I'm sure, were notified on your screens, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be shared to our YouTube page, and I will share more information on that momentarily. But let me just go ahead and pop my slides up while we wait for a few more people to come in. Alrighty, well, it looks like we have a significant number here with us already. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off. Thank you everyone for joining. I am so pleased to have Asa S. Locker with us today from Renaissance Planning. I will introduce Asa a little bit more momentarily. Whoops, I don't know how that happened. But I just wanted to provide some quick housekeeping items. First of all, huge thank you to the Berkeley Group for sponsoring our Your Hour series. Stay tuned for more information for next month's. You will notice that our website is under construction, so to speak. We are working on some updates, but our webinar series page is largely up to date, and you can find recent links to the recordings of past webinars and the CM credit information. And for today's webinar, our CM credit information is right here, and I'll also pop that in the chat as well. So you'll see me dropping a few items in the chat. Again, I will link our website. So we really do encourage questions. Please submit your questions through the Q&A box versus the chat box. This will just help us keep track of all inquiries. You can also use the raise hand feature to request to be unmuted to ask your question orally or verbally, but otherwise the Q&A box is the best place to be. I am going to stop sharing my screen, introduce Asa a little bit further, and allow him to, in the meantime, pop up his slides. But everybody, thank you so much for joining. I think we have a really great webinar ahead of us. Asa was with us at our conference this past year in Roanoke, and it was a standing room only session. So we're so glad that we're able to share this this work of Renaissance Planning with a broader audience through the webinar series. So let me just go ahead and introduce Asa a little bit more. Asa, with 20 years of experience as a storyteller and producer in various contexts, is the Director of Strategic Design and Communication for Renaissance Planning, a multidisciplinary planning and urban design firm with offices in Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida. He is a landscape architect, urban designer, journalist, filmmaker, and certified drone pilot who brings a range of engagement and media production experience to his work with Renaissance. Asa holds a Master of Landscape Architecture from UVA, where he also taught design communication courses and studio in the School of Architecture. Prior to moving to Charlottesville and UVA in 2011, Asa had an 8-year career as an investigative producer with ABC News in New York, where he was recognized with a number of awards, including 2 National News Emmy Awards in 2006 and 2008. And I think you can peek at one of those Emmys in the background of Asa's space. More recently, Asa has led presentations about storytelling for inclusive public engagement at various forums that include the 2023 National APA Conference and the 2023 APA Virginia Conference as well. For today's webinar, Asa will build upon past presentations with new examples from Virginia that include relevant strategies, tools, and resources for planners working toward more inclusive engagement outcomes. So again, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Asa, for presenting. I will hand it over to you.
Well, great. Can everybody, Jillian, I assume you can, if you can't see my screen, please let me know.
Looks good.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you, Jillian. Thank you, APA Virginia Chapter and Board of Directors as well for this opportunity. Today, I have the pleasure to share about our projects and process around storytelling, not yelling, towards more inclusive public engagement. And as one of my colleagues, Stephen Johnson, says, if you signed up for storytelling with yelling, that's a webinar on a different day. So I have to steal this joke, which I love. So let's just dive in, right? Today's webinar will begin with a quick primer. We've got a rogue drone here. I didn't realize that animation was still on, but we will begin with a quick primer on why storytelling is important. Then I'll dive into a case study on the power of storytelling and story gathering. Then we'll explore the structure and the fascinating science of storytelling. And that'll be followed by the various types and forms of storytelling with a final example from Virginia Beach. And now I really want this session and these tools and these strategies to apply to you all as best as possible and apply to your work. So remember, like I tell my colleagues, we are all storytellers. This is kind of like Oprah, right? You're a storyteller, you're a storyteller, you're a storyteller. It's just that I think we've gotten out of the practice of it. And so hopefully today, some of the tools and strategies will help inspire more storytelling in our planning work. So thank you so much for being here. I think this will be fun. So I mentioned my colleagues. I've got some great colleagues at Renaissance Planning. I've been working in the planning sector now for over 3 years with Renaissance, and we are multidisciplinary planning professionals with expertise in integrating multimodal transportation planning, land use, urban design, data science, and inclusive community engagement. I like to say that we bring it all together, and we love busting silos to create cities that work. We have projects and work all over the country, and we have 2 offices in Virginia. I'm based in Charlottesville. We have an office in Arlington, and we have staff in Richmond as well. But we do a wide range of federal, state, regional, county, city work, and we're actively seeking more Virginia partnerships and clients. So please feel free to reach out to me after this session if you're inspired by this storytelling work that we like to do. And so on behalf of Renaissance, I'm proud to share our storytelling and inclusive engagement that really supports our integrative planning approach. And like Jillian mentioned, I came into planning and community engagement and urban design after my MLA at UVA, which came after an 8-year career at ABC News in New York City. And that's really where I learned and honed storytelling as an investigative journalist and broadcast news producer. I also did a documentary, and that's a different story for a different day. But from my 8 years at ABC News, there are many stories to tell, including being beat up on camera in West Virginia coal country. And yes, I'm proud this won a few awards in 2008. And other stories led me to see many cities and urban environments, which led to landscape architecture and urban planning. And now this exciting hybrid storytelling, planning, and engagement work with Renaissance Planning. So while today should be fun, this is also deeply important and personal as well. First, I want to acknowledge, and I want to validate that your work in the planning sector is often very challenging. And it's also incredibly rewarding, right? So as planners, as public servants, as community-minded professionals, why do this work? For me and many others, it's all about connection and helping others connect with each other. It's about our values to engage with the neighbors around us and to help improve our communities in the world we live in. My family and I, we like to ride our bikes. I coach my kids' baseball team, and that's one of the ways I connect and love and try to give back to our community. But for the most part, planning your work is public service. And I want to commend you all for working and serving the public realm And also thank you for being here and your willingness to learn more about the power of storytelling in service of our shared public good. So this is where I'm coming from. This is my truth. This is my authentic self today. And I wholeheartedly believe that this is the foundation and the ethos of doing planning and the storytelling that serves the communities and the people where we work and where we live. However, despite our biological need for connection with others and our universal yearning for healthy, livable, well-connected streets, neighborhoods, towns, and cities, now, unfortunately, planning is operating in a high conflict system. Amanda Ripley's book, High Conflict, Why We Get Trapped and How We Get Out, explains that good conflict or healthy conflict is a necessary force that pushes us to be better people and build better communities. Ripley provides some wisdom here. She says, when we get to yelling, we are typically at a high conflict state, and constructive conflict has left the room. Therefore, the goal is to get ourselves, our communities, out of high conflict. High conflict dehumanizes, and healthy conflict fosters collaborative problem solving. So, constructive conflict, healthy conflict. I believe, and I hope to show you today that in many ways, while it's not a cure-all, storytelling gets ourselves and our communities out of this high conflict state of mind. It's one method for finding common ground, for elevating and aligning diverse community voices, and helps to create spaces for healthy collaboration. So additionally, there's a fascinating and growing body of multidisciplinary research that's the foundation for today's presentation. All right, like I'm not just making this up. All right, and you'll see I like to geek out on the research as well. So we've also seen incredible interest in the power of storytelling. Like Jillian said, our sessions at the state and national conference were both very well received. And now the national session is in the APA Learn catalog, so that's pretty cool. There's a link on the screen. Finally, I felt a strong feeling of validation when the APA recently released this memo on storytelling as authentic engagement. And it's written by the chief storyteller for the city and county of Denver and the director of the new Denver Office of Storytelling. So this author is like a kindred soul. I just think this is so cool that Denver has a director and an office of storytelling, right? So this really cements the need, the process, and the acceptance of the APA for the power of storytelling to support all of our work. And just a quick excerpt, right? Why engage in storytelling? Storytelling provides an opportunity to explain and teach, but also to listen and learn from constituents, to make plans not only for community, but with them. So just wanted to say that's a great article, and that will also be in the PowerPoint later after this. So now let's dig in. Now it's time for a real world story. This is a story about how storytelling reminds us that there's far more that connects us than separates us. This is also a story behind the story. And it's a story about the worst public workshop of my career. Well, it was almost the worst. This is a case study about how we were walking into a public workshop in Central Florida that was certainly set up as potentially the worst of my career. This is the story that we call the Wauchula 180. It's named after this lovely small town in Florida. Or the story of Bad Attitude John in the battle over 6 lanes. And why the bad attitude? I'll tell this story in a minute. But first, a big part of this story, and what is especially relevant for your work in planning, is that well-crafted stories harness emotions, and emotions drive decision-making. And that storytelling can actually be a method for helping diverse communities move past polarized divides towards mutually beneficial outcomes. So This is important, serious work. It can also be really fun and really meaningful. But we grapple with serious questions like these for nearly every project and every engagement scenario. How can well-crafted, authentic storytelling benefit the communities we serve? How can storytelling address equity and bridge polarized communities? And why should planners care? So, back to Wauchula, Florida, the setting for our story. A beautiful rural community with wonderful people about 60 miles southeast of Tampa, where we were hired by the Florida Department of Transportation to lead a community engagement and transportation study that will ultimately improve a state highway that cuts right through this small town. So this is the setting. And additionally, it's vital for any compelling story to have a strong central conflict. So what is it?
It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me.
Taylor Swift, got to say, one of the greatest storytellers of our generation, of our era, the anti-hero, the central conflict of this story is Highway US 17. US 17 is a 4-lane highway that actually expands into a 6-lane highway only inside the city limits of Wauchula. It completely bisects the community in 2 places, dominating the physical built environment. And while many believe that 6 lanes, while many here, ask like, why a 6-lane highway through downtown? We want better walkability, better bike and pedestrian connections. And then others are saying, hey, more highway brings economic development. We want faster connection for potential development and more jobs. Don't you dare take away or change any of our lanes, right? So our story begins in early 2021, and US 17 is rescheduled for resurfacing and potential redesign. But before the work begins, we were hired to lead the study and the community engagement, to hear from community members about their goals and their vision for potential design elements, right? Like improved multimodal access or safety improvements, speed management, or placemaking goals that align with the community's existing plans and existing desires. And this is actually really thoughtful and proactive, that FDOT is fully aware of the legacy of urban renewal. And they want to make sure that the community can speak into the repair and the resurfacing process. And so at this point is where the community vision storytelling and story gathering begins. Because I truly believe that the story gathering is just as important, if not more important, than the actual storytelling. So zooming out for a minute, this is what we call the story gathering phase. This is the listening, interviewing, and data gathering phase. It's just as important as the storytelling. So a community vision video like Wauchula's begins here. So first, I plan for an interview as diverse array of people as possible and seek out to find their common ground and common vision for their community. It's all about aligning goals. The filming is based on location. So the story gathering is grounded in place. So it's place-based with diverse human-centered stories, all woven into the final video that will be screened at the public workshop later in the summer. We use the journalistic method. None of this is scripted ahead of time. Like I said, we have diverse first-person interviews, tours, shadowing, ride along with people, and of course, the golden rule, like I try to teach my kids that treat others the way you want to be treated yourself, especially in their car, their truck, or in their community. You want to bestow dignity. You want to listen and be as respectful as possible. Budget and scope for these kind of things as early as possible. And this is often one of the biggest challenges because most agencies or clients or communities really rarely ever budget or scope storytelling in these projects. So it's really important to do this as early as possible. And then after the interviews, we create these transcripts. And these transcripts are a rich trove of data that pairs with our robust hard data and our data analytics team. So the hard data and the soft data, or the human-centered data, meet. And I like to call that the sweet spot between the hard and the soft data. And then the gear, we were doing this in person. I have a whole table of show and tell. I can really geek out on the gear. I love the gear, but the gear is light. It's mid-budget. It's very cost-effective, and with DSLR cameras, small tripods, and a lot of consumer grade and smartphones as well. So this is relatively easy to do with the gear that we use and the gear that I like to recommend. All right, so back in Wauchula, Florida, back to our story. A few months before the August workshop, I arrived to do the story gathering for this project. And I met and I interviewed all these nice folks. These are the characters, of course, in the story. But during this time, something else was happening in a small community. Polarization and fear are simmering. False information spreads about the project, and public mistrust nearly spiraled out of control. Little did we know that supporters of keeping all 6 lanes were fired up about a rumor of supposed lane repurposing, going from 6 lanes to 4. And they told us that it felt like it would be a step backward for their economic growth. And also this idea of government is here to take away something. It's a very powerful and scary narrative that we've seen before, even though that wasn't true. And then the local news fueled the fire, and a lot of mistrust swirled in the community, and many grew entrenched in their own assumptions about what the project was and what the community engagement and the information gathering that was coming up. And the local news even followed me around and unfortunately wrote some misleading articles that weren't true. We were not supporting or promoting lane repurposing, right? And so this also, really just added fuel to the fire. So then the August 3rd, 2021, it was a humid and warm late afternoon, and we set up and prepared for the Wauchula Community Workshop. But as we were setting up, arriving 15 minutes early, was Mr. Bad Attitude himself, Big John. He seemed like a former college football player. He had impeccable snakeskin boots. You can tell I somehow caught a photo of that. He was wearing a high-end blazer and a nice watch. Big John was well-spoken, and he came early to give us a piece of his mind. He even said that he and others were ready for a fight. And for a few tense moments before the workshop began, Big John sat down with our team and our principal, Frank Kalpakis. And Big John didn't shy away from sharing his fears about the misnomer of narrowing down US 17 to one road, and how many others feared that FDOT was going to arbitrarily stick a one-lane road down our throat. And many others arrived with the same assumptions. And then at 5 p.m., the workshop began. After a brief introduction, our team, Frank, kicked off the 3-hour workshop with the 10-minute version of the Wauchula Community Story video. But for today, I have a cut-down version that you'll still be able to see the story arc and the story characters. The cut-down version is just around 3.5 minutes. And so I'm going to play that for you all now. But before I play the 3.5-minute version, first, imagine yourself as a community member in that room. Try to imagine the tension and all the different viewpoints, not just Big John, but all the perspectives. All right, and here's the video.
Welcome to Wauchula in Hardy County, and enjoy your visit.
I love Wauchula. It's my home. My family is here.
Well, here's Wauchula. We love it here.
This community is my family.
Let me get you a little combo plate. Sliced brisket, and then about a 1/4 pound of pulled pork.
I can just picture like the sewing machines lined up. We are so excited to be on Main Street.
My wife and I chose to come back here. We raised our family here. Wauchula in Hardy County is my home.
So our downtown is beautiful. We have a lot of local-owned businesses that have been around the area forever, a lot of old buildings.
US 17 is the economic lifeblood of this community.
You've got some of these trucks coming through at 50 miles an hour. The buildings are really tied up to 17, so it's not the most walkable area. It's loud, it's scary. You don't want to trip over the curb.
It feels like a freight train goes by sometimes. My daughter goes to gymnastics just 2 blocks from my office. I don't feel like it's safe. I don't feel like traffic is slow enough. I feel like people are flying to beat the red light.
So we've been working now for about 15 years to develop a more diversified manufacturing economy. When our riveter came about, I felt like it was an opportunity made in heaven for us, because they have a very large following of people that just love their product.
It's 4th of July weekend. We're celebrating in a big way here at QVC. It's also our Riveters Day, Special Value Day.
We are on Main Street at the corner of Main Street and 17. So we're super excited to become a part of downtown. We manufacture handbags that provide mobile flexible income for military spouses across the country. Traffic flow and parking will be an important aspect for us, and making sure the logistics of people getting across the street.
We certainly would love any type of aesthetic enhancement that can happen. We have this conflict of aesthetics and functionality, but I'm concerned about decreasing functionality.
I mean, yeah, I get traffic needs to flow, but we still want to be able to accomplish a walkable downtown at the same time.
The vision for the downtown in 10 or 20 years would be for it to be a destination. I hope that there's that community engagement and feedback that SDOT really needs. We want this project, whatever it ends up ultimately being, to be the right fit for our community.
Well, nothing remains the same. There's change that's constantly going on. So we have to be aware of those changes and try to keep Wauchula on the cutting edge of adapting.
So I got 2 little boys, and I think about when I leave here, or I stop being mayor, I just want to make sure that whatever I do, whatever we do as a commission, that we've left it in a better place.
And we want it to be a place that kids want to come back to after they graduate high school. So creating that environment that they're proud of is really key.
Appreciate your business. Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
So after the community story video, the whole atmosphere in the room changed. And actually, what I'll show you is that their brain chemistry also likely changed. The audience went into the workshop ready to listen, ready to engage and collaborate, and ready to work with people who had different viewpoints. And by the end of the workshop, community members and FDOT staff expressed their appreciation for the surprisingly successful workshop and video. And so we had pulled off a complete 180 in Wauchula that day. So of course, that's why we call it the Wauchula 180. And as for bad attitude John, well, those were his own words at the end of the workshop. Big John humbly asked to address the whole group, and this is what he said at the end.
Now, I came with a bad attitude because I earned a bad attitude. So I had a bad attitude coming here. I didn't want them coming in here and narrowing down to one road. And I am convinced that these people are not going to come in here and arbitrarily stick a one-lane road down our throat. And I am extremely pleased, and I'm glad I came, and I appreciate what you are doing. Thank you. Thanks for coming down.
And that is the power of storytelling. It has the power to change bad attitudes and change deeply entrenched or polarized beliefs. And of course, it's not a cure-all, but when done well, storytelling has a wide range of benefits for inclusive and equitable outcomes. And now I get to share some more on the structure of storytelling and share some of the fascinating neuroscience that sheds light on what made this Wauchula 180 possible. So first, what is narrative and what is storytelling? Just as an overview, narrative is both the story, what is told, and the means of telling. It's a product and process, right? So a first-person account, a book, or community video like this. And narratives are the oldest and primary ways that humans make sense of the world. And I just think this is fascinating that as our brains evolved and languages developed, so did storytelling. And what is storytelling? It's the vivid description of ideas, beliefs, personal experiences, and life lessons through stories or narratives that evoke powerful emotions and insights. Of course, they've got a beginning, middle, and end, and often good stories end with themes that were established in the beginning. And of course, they've got the classic 5 W's plus H, the where, when, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Okay, so why do we care, right? Here's Tom Cruise, Jerry Maguire from the 90s. Try not to date myself too much, but show me the money, right? We care because stories harness emotion, and emotions drive decision making. And let me show you some of the research. And stories can also drive behavior as well. So first, the compelling and widely cited elephant and rider analogy. It was introduced by social psychologist Jonathan Haidt for thinking about behavior change. And this analogy represents the two sides of human nature. The rider is the logical, rational decision maker, but the elephant is the most powerful part of self, right? It's our emotions, our deeply held beliefs, our stubborn opinions, our gut, right? So internally, these feelings are like a stubborn elephant that needs the right kind of motivation to change directions or change entrenched behaviors or beliefs in order to move forward. And stories can harness this powerful side of human nature. Going back even further to classical philosophy, Plato had a similar analogy known as the chariot allegory, and where again, the charioteer is our reason, the charioteer is our logical, rational driver of the soul, and the horses are irrational, powerful passions. And again, stories help guide our inner horses and chariots. And so, story structures, right? They generate a wide range of neural activity and hormonal responses, right? So why is Renee Zellweger there? Why is that cute kid there? Even if you haven't seen Jerry Maguire, you got Tom Cruise yelling, "Show me the money," right? Your brain is starting to make associations and is curious about this, right? So we recognize certain narrative elements implicitly or explicitly, and subconsciously, our brain knows that we are hoping, expecting, and waiting for something in a well-told story. It's often these ups and downs, right? The tension, the conflict, release, the resolution of stories that immerse and engage our brains. Our brains love this type of roller coaster, and we just love this kind of storytelling structure. So here are two examples. And so one is the man in the hole. This is the dramatic story structure. And then there's Freytag's pyramid, which you may remember from high school drama class or English class, literature class, right? It's got 5 acts, and it represents the structure of stories from Shakespeare to Alfred Hitchcock to Jerry Maguire. But there are many different story structures. But one of my favorites is man in the hole structure. And if there's only one thing that you take away from this presentation today, it would be really trying to understand this man in the hole story structure. I think it's incredibly relevant, and it's actually super simple. Kurt Vonnegut, the author, said nobody ever lost money telling the story of a man in a hole. And of course, it works great for fiction, but I think it also works great for nonfiction. I think it works great for memos, for putting together reports, for telling the story of a community. And I'm going to illustrate that right now. And so it has 5, it's got 5 main key parts to this story structure. So the first part is the comfort zone, right? So this is, the existing conditions, the character development, what happens at the beginning. And in our story, this is the setup, right? I love Wauchula. Welcome to Wauchula. This is my home. And the science says the first 15 seconds of the story are crucial for grabbing and keeping attention. So then number 2, the trigger. Something happens, and this triggers a challenge or an action. Change is coming, right? Often the main character in a movie, something triggers a change for that main character. And, same thing in our story, right? The anti-hero, US 17, and this new project, it triggers potential new ideas. It triggers fear of change. It triggers challenging the status quo in the community. Where's that science? Sorry, I clicked too fast. And then the crisis. You're down in the hole. And of course, this is where the discovery, transformation, and the turning point happens. But you're down in that hole. Way down in the hole. Way down in the hole. I had that song stuck in my head when I was doing this. And yeah, of course, this is The Wire, created by David Simon, another fabulous storyteller, one of my favorite series on TV. But our crisis in this story, right? Bill says, we have a conflict. And this is where, there's transformation. Down in the crisis is where you get unstuck. And often, as I tell my kids, failure can often be your greatest teacher, right? And that's any good story. There's some transformation in this crisis. And the science says that when you have attention plus people plus a crisis, conflict, fear, or tension, that this often results in oxytocin. And then an immersive story has empathy. It holds your attention and it motivates action. And ultimately, in our work as planners, we want to motivate action. And so, I think that this is just fascinating, how an immersive story can hold your attention and can motivate action. And then the fourth part, recovery. This is where you harness the transformation, you harness the discovery or what was learned to climb out of the hole. And in our story, City and FDOT, they need to come together. They need a partnership. They need to recover together. And then finally, the better place, of course, is kind of like the resolution. This is you become wiser, more mature, audiences care, and they feel differently. And in our story, it's why care? Well, for future, for family, for legacy, for common purpose and goals. When the mayor says, I want to leave this a better place, I've got 2 boys and I want to leave Wauchula a better place, that really hits me. I've got 2 boys as well, 3 kids. And, I really relate to that. And so that's the better place. A quick shout out here. This is another resource, PIP decks. I love these PIP decks. And they've got workshop tactics and storyteller tactics. They're like a deck of cards. And they have some of these tactics here. Man in the Hole is one of them. And you can use these for a whole range of design thinking activities or brainstorming. But so I'm really interested in the fascinating neuroscience of storytelling. And so our brain's on storytelling. A well-told story really lights up your whole brain. And a growing body of brain science and MRI scans show how storytelling produces a strong emotional and neurological response from multiple regions in our brain. Stories help us remember the details and attend to information, see different perspectives, and build empathy for the characters. And this kind of emotional learning builds emotional investment in the story and in the people. So now the neuroscience, how storytelling changes the brain. So when you hear a good story, your whole brain lights up. Some people call this the angel's cocktail of hormones. And some of these hormones are oxytocin, known as the bonding hormone. It's released from these good moments, these feeling connected to the characters. And it results in the listeners are more caring, increased empathy, trust, and you feel more human. Stories can also release endorphins. They're released from laughter or happy moments, also from like food, exercise, or sex. Endorphins, this is often the comic relief in a story. So it results in the listener, it results in less stress. It relieves pain, more relaxed, more creative, and focused. Cortisol, even though it is a stress hormone, it's released from this tension or the crisis, the distress or conflict. And the results in the listener, it results in increased focus, attention, and memory. You see the compounding effects, the theme here. And finally, dopamine, known as the motivation hormone. It's released from the recovery in the story, the resolving conflict, the climax to the resolution, and of course, the happy ending. Our brains release dopamine. And in the listener, it results in a high in pleasure, hope, more accurate recall, and increased focus. So all of these hormones have this whole cascading effect on our brains when they are released from an authentic, well-told story. And those neurochemicals and hormones that result from good storytelling, they enhance your neural activity, and they support a complex array of cognitive and affective processes that builds empathy, emotional connection, investment, and helps to decenter power and privilege. And so thus stories are persuasive in ways that standard arguments or just data alone are not. And some of these neural processes include neural coupling, and the brain mirrors or mirroring. It lights up exactly like the storyteller. So the listener and the storyteller, their brains kind of mirror each other. This builds trust, empathy, understanding, and connection. And this idea of brainwave synchronization. So humans are social creatures, and we're wired for positive connection with others. And the science is just starting to understand that this idea of being on the same wavelength of someone is actually real. I think this is just so interesting. So researchers suspect that this phenomenon is beneficial because it prepares humans for social interaction. Think about the folks in that room in Wauchula. It prepares them for connection, and it may have even facilitated the evolution of sociality in humans. And then transportation theory. No, this is not transportation up and down US 17. This is actually the vicarious immersion in the world of the story. The listener resonates emotionally, responds with empathy, and new neural connections are created. So now think back again to Big John and the folks in that room in Wauchula. And think back to how you might have been transported yourself to that warm, tense Wauchula workshop when I was telling the story. Hopefully you were. So I could geek out about the science, but now I want to give a quick overview on a few types of storytelling in production for engagement. So this gets down to some of the types that we do, right? So while the Wauchula community story is one of my favorite examples for illustrating story gathering process and for illustrating the science and structure of authentic community-based storytelling, not all of our videos or storytelling productions are like that one, right? So there's a range of other types of visual multimedia storytelling that are also effective for inclusive public engagement. So number one, I already talked about the community vision videos. Number two, the project kickoff videos. These are similar to the community vision videos. They have heartfelt interviews and stories of hope and aspirations. They're often educational, and they help to explain the project. This is a screen grab from the kickoff video for a TOD study in Jacksonville, Florida for the Jacksonville Transit Authority. So these are teaching and educational videos, but they draw you in with real people and real hopes and needs. Then number three, the site project tour videos. This was for a virtual series of stakeholder shreds for Frederick, Maryland, but they can be virtual. They can be used for virtual, hybrid, and in-person engagement. And these videos can give a multi-dimensional overview with infographics, annotated maps, motion graphics that highlight features of a place, like a railroad or parcels for infill. And then explainer videos, finally. We do a wide array of explainer videos, and this brings us back to Virginia with my last example for the city of Virginia Beach. And some explainer videos have interviews, but most have well-scripted voiceover with many types of motion graphics and infographics to help explain a complex topic and to help build buy-in by making often a complex project easy to understand for wide audiences. We do other types of storytelling like Esri's story maps and other digital dashboards for storytelling, but I'll keep it at this. And so that just takes us to the final storytelling example. It's been supporting ongoing work with the city of Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach is at an inflection point and ready for planning that integrates land use and transportation in new ways. The city has historically grown outward, but now it needs to figure out how to grow in and grow vertically. with new ideas for a changing and evolving city. And here, our Renaissance team worked with the city and felt that an explainer video would be the best fit for their public engagement. So similar to the community vision video, this explainer video has been screened at a series of public workshops throughout the city last fall, I believe back in November. And this video helps, again, to prime the pump for collaboration at these public engagement sessions. So today I won't play the whole 10-minute video, but I have a few 2-minute videos to give you an idea of the overall explainer video concepts from Virginia Beach. So first, the first video, we had to find out the aspirations. Well, there was a first round of feedback back in the summer that gathered a lot of the aspirations. And the first video, the introduction part of this video that I'll show you now, synthesizes that into themes. So this is the beginning, and it's an abridged short version that helps to explain the gathering and how the themes were developed.
Virginia Beach is updating its comprehensive plan. The plan is the city's vision for the future. It guides and coordinates city programs, studies, regulations, and investments. The update begins with identifying guiding themes and how they will play out in the city's unique places, such as its natural areas, including Broad Bay and Back Bay, commercial centers and corridors, such as the resort area and town center, communities and neighborhoods, such as Kempsville and Green Run, and rural and agricultural areas as well. In July, the city and its consulting team met with people representing differing interests in parts of the city. Participants let us know about their aspirations for the city. Those aspirations were summarized into draft themes. It's now time to hear from others, both online and at the in-person meetings, about the future of Virginia Beach. We want to know, do the themes from the first set of focus group meetings resonate with you? Are there others we need to consider? Do the draft place types make sense to you? Are there others to consider? Most importantly, how do you think the themes should play out in each place type? The aspirations at the first focus group meetings were grouped into 5 areas: environmental sustainability, balanced growth, economic, cultural, and civic diversity, sense of community, bike, pedestrian, and transit accessibility.
So without playing the entire video, you can see how those 5 key aspirations were informed by community themes and feedback through an iterative listening process with multiple groups. And given those 5 themes, instead of doing the conventional approach of just looking at land use and transportation or housing and environmental, our team decided it was important to see the city differently and approach this plan differently. So we decided to look at place types. By looking at place types, we are able to look holistically at land use, transportation, environment, housing, growth, all simultaneously by synthesizing them into place types.
The new comprehensive plan will still have the functional elements of the current plan, but will now be organized by place types, including conservation, countryside, corridors, centers, communities, neighborhoods, and districts. Conservation areas, the natural areas of the city, including estuaries, tributaries, and wetlands, like Lynn Haven River and Back Bay, its shoreline along the Atlantic Ocean and the Chesapeake Bay.
So that goes through all the place types, which will be reiterated in this final video. But by building upon the themes and then building upon those place types, the culmination of this overall explainer video is a series of big ideas. I'm not going to show all of the big ideas, but just a few in this abridged version that wraps it up. But you can see then the story structure and how it comes together in this final video.
Since the merger of the city of Virginia Beach and Princess Anne County in 1963, the city has grown outward. Suburban development stretched into rural land. With the Atlantic to the east, the Chesapeake Bay to the north, the cities of Norfolk and Chesapeake to the west, and the protection of rural areas to the south, development in Virginia Beach has stretched as far as it can. Because of its compelling natural setting and a vibrant economy, the city will continue to grow, but it will grow up, not out, which requires a new perspective, a new vision. That vision will be driven by big ideas. The big ideas merge aspirational themes with place types. The first big idea would enhance and permanently protect natural areas in the city. Big idea 2 creates a linear park system that forms nature-based connections for walking and biking between the city's many cherished tributaries. The system would include walking, biking, kayaking trails, recreational parks, and natural areas. The centerpiece of the system would be the old Norfolk Southern Railroad right-of-way that extends from the Norfolk border to the ocean front. The trail will be used for more than just biking and walking. It would be a vibrant public space that would host a variety of activities. North-south trails would intersect with the rail line to provide walking and biking access from nearly every neighborhood.
So it goes to the other big ideas: multimodal corridors, mixed-use walkable centers, enhanced community centers, convenient biking and walking, homes and neighborhoods. And then
Big
finally,
idea 9 focuses on attracting innovative, environmentally sustainable businesses and educational institutions, such as renewable energy and sea level rise companies to the city. The city would brand areas and plan the locations where companies and institutions could locate. We would like your thoughts about these big ideas. Do you have other big ideas for us to consider? Of the big ideas presented, which ones resonate with you and why?
so hopefully you can see how an explainer video like this would be helpful to prime the pump for collaboration at an ongoing series of community engagement events. You can see that it distills, this really rich, comprehensive plan update into about 10 minutes for a wide range of audiences, and of course, will be part on their website and accessible there. And so we're excited to keep working on this Imagine VB comprehensive plan with the city of Virginia Beach into the next phases of the project. So in conclusion, why care?
Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control. Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
I mean, I think it's deeply ingrained in all of us to care about who lives, who dies, and who tells our story, right? That's Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda. We care about good storytelling because stories harness emotion, and emotions drive decision-making. Story gathering and storytelling is all about connection. Storytelling persuades and inspires because of emotional learning and emotional investment, that stories can actually change your brain chemistry. Storytelling shifts core beliefs and decenters power and privilege. It supports equity and inclusion by leveling the playing field. Storytelling is a vital part of inclusive engagement, and it's often left out of budget and scope. Most agencies and clients don't realize that they need it until they see or experience the power of storytelling. Finally, storytelling is fun, it's deeply meaningful, and it's uplifting to the communities we serve. We just love doing this kind of work. And finally, again, storytelling reminds us that there's far more that connects us than separates us. Thank you so much for your participation today in this webinar. This has been such a great opportunity, and we still have some time for question and answer. Jillian?
Thank you so much, Asa. I think it was an excellent presentation. We had a question a few minutes ago from Meredith Gruber. Meredith is asking, Meredith says, it was mentioned earlier to include storytelling when scoping a project. I'm the planning director for a town in North Carolina, and we are getting ready to write an RFQ or RFP for a comprehensive plan update. I think storytelling would help our community with providing input on what we want to change or not moving forward. Where are the best places to include storytelling in the scope/proposal?
I think within the engagement process is part of it. I mean, sometimes, yeah, that's usually where we have to, when we get we're awarded a project or we work with someone, the engagement, that is a really important place where we have to figure out how to fund storytelling as well. So I would recommend that it's in an early phase, like the engagement phase, or it could be coupled with, you know, of course, there's always some type of a data gathering. You know, that's the ArcGIS data, other elements, and you could include this as being, you know, the human-centered data collection. And that's interviewing community leaders or organizations to hear their perspectives. And, you know, maybe it's a lot of my interviews are sometimes a 20-minute, 25, 30-minute interview. And then it all goes through transcriptions. Like I said, rev.com, it's 25 cents a minute for those kind of transcriptions. And then you have all that human-centered data gathered from those interviews is really rich, and really trying to find that sweet spot between the hard data and those human-centered soft data. So it could be part of the data gathering phase or that, you know, public engagement, that community engagement phase as well. But I'm really glad you're thinking of that, Meredith. That warms my heart to hear.
And we have a few other comments. Omar Masri suggests or highly recommends the book Don't Think of an Elephant to improve framing and connecting with different audiences. And then just another remark from Kay Graybeal. I'm sorry if I'm getting any of the names incorrectly. Thank you for this presentation. It covers a subject that is not typically covered in depth. When you think about it, it's a great way to build connections, gain interest, and trust during public engagement.
That's right. Yeah, I've been, Kay, thank you for your comment. It's really been remarkable. You know, when I started in planning, you know, it was really great that Renaissance really sees the power of storytelling, and it's like, you know, let's couple this with our engagement. And one after another, the storytelling, when it was coupled with the engagement, just like in Wauchula, really has been incredibly successful. And then doing the research that's in this presentation, it's like, oh, okay, I see. You know, I've always kind of known this. I think a lot of us know that storytelling can be good, you know, but really then seeing and reading all of this research over the past year and a half, you know, it just really buttresses this idea and this concept that storytelling can really support communities that have been marginalized, that feel voiceless, and it can help to bring their voice into these conversations. The APA memo, real quick, that I mentioned, Storytelling as Authentic Engagement, that was written by the director of Office of Storytelling in Denver, you know, says, primarily by creating such films in the voices of residents with no narrators or voiceovers, which is often the style that we use, our work preserves and shares stories that help make Denver history more complete, inclusive, and accurate. We bring those missing resident voices into City Hall to inform policy decisions, as well as into community for conversation. We use storytelling for engagement that fosters relationships, not only with the city, but with our community, particularly around issues of social justice. So, I mean, you know, this means so much to me that you can elevate voices and bring people in to the conversation who have conventionally been left out through this type of storytelling. And that's why I think it's so important.
Thank you, Asa. We have a question from Emily Wolfson, and we do have 2 more minutes. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to do so now. But I will note that we will be putting out a follow-up email to all attendees, which will include ASA's contact information, as well as the link to the slide deck and to the recording. So if you do think of any questions after this webinar, I know ASA welcomes communication in that regard.
Yeah,
So
please reach out.
Emily Wolfson asks, how do we convince public officials that this is important? For example, the cost of storytelling is necessary before they get sticker shock.
Yeah, that's something that we come up against quite a bit. Yeah, how can you convince? I mean, it would be an easy answer for me to say, well, you should use a good story to convince them that storytelling is necessary. I think that we can often make the case, perhaps to those folks who are more hard data minded, that this is a type of data. It's just a different type of data, but it's a piece of data, the human-centered data, the story, the data in these stories is a type of data that needs to be acknowledged and recognized, just like data in GIS, just like demographic data or census data, that there is a vital part of data collection that is being left out of the work that we do. And some people could argue that the hard data, the data sciences, those data PhDs, that is, sometimes I don't even understand, that can often be exclusive. And these kind of stories that are necessary for understanding and including marginalized communities as part of, that support social justice. This is something that many planning departments in the past have not done. And it's time to recognize other types of information, other types of data, like the stories from communities and people that have been left out of the conversation. And so if we recognize the importance of truly being inclusive in our society and in our communities, we need to recognize other forms of data, and those data are story.
Thank you, Asa. I'm not sure, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. If for those of you who are able to stay on for one more minute, and if Asa is available to answer one last question, I think there's a question that relates to what you just spoke to. Well, two sort of. One is asking, how will you make sure that marginalized voices will be heard and act on what the community needs in a beneficial way? And another question, how do we ensure that these videos also reach back to the members of those marginalized communities with knowing that there's less access? If you just want to speak briefly to that.
Yeah, there's a number. Well, so this is a big part of hearing. Yeah, the stories are hearing. Then action, often, I think a lot of us know that how do plans, how do long-range transportation plans and comprehensive plans, what happens in those plans, how does that actually come to fruition in 5, 10, 20, 30 years? Now that is a harder question that we all have to grapple with. I think that it's too big of one for us to answer today. It's a great question though, and obviously very important to the planning profession. But the type of storytelling, I think, is a way for allowing multiple communities to be heard into that process. And then the second part of the question was reach. And I think that in that question, it's a very good question, but there's also this assumption that maybe low-income communities and marginalized communities don't have means. But more and more we're finding that almost all members of society have phones, have ways of getting online. And often smartphones as well. And so yes, we don't want to make the assumption that everybody can access these types of digital stories, but that's of course then why it's so important to go where people are, to meet people where they are, and to understand your audience in this kind of a context, especially in the community engagement context, understanding your audience and hearing from them what ways might they speak better to them. right? And we often know that, like, yeah, whether it's a 10-page report or a 50-page report is not going to speak to a community, but a video where they see themselves and their friends and the leaders, you know, in the community speaking about it in a video, that we know that transcends all groups, that transcends all levels of income. Yeah, maybe it was a case 10 or 15 years ago where a lot of people didn't have smartphones, but now it's pretty well recognized that almost all people have some sort of a way of getting online and consuming digital media.
Well, thank you, Asa, for going a little bit over time to answer some of those questions. There are a few more questions, but I just encourage you to reach out to Asa with any further questions at this point, just to be respectful of time. But I think that the amount of questions and engagement that we got is also a reflection of how great of a presentation it was and how important of a topic it was. So thank you so much, Asa. And everyone who attended, please keep your eyes peeled on your inboxes, because we will be sending out that follow-up email with all the helpful links in the coming days. But otherwise, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their afternoon.
Thank you so much. This is a real pleasure, and please reach out to me. I welcome emails or phone calls, and look at our website and reach out if you have any more questions or would like to partner. Thank you.
Thank you.